So today we're breaking down the ultimate New York City bucket list for New York City locals, because everyone's always telling tourists what to do, but locals can use some tips too on how to make the most of their time in New York City. So the first tip I have for us locals is to complete all the classic tourist activities. I know, New Yorkers think that we're above all the tourist attractions, but we're actually missing out. These activities are high rated for a reason, and they allow us to gain a new perspective on landmarks that we may normally take for granted. So give into the hype, watch the sunset from the top of the Empire State Building, see how long you keep your hand raised like the Statue of Liberty. Come on, y'all, we can't let the tourists have all the fun. So my next tip for locals is to find go-to places for all the classic New York foods. I don't know about you, but I am outright embarrassed when someone from out of town asks me where they can find the best pizza or the best bagels, and my mind draws a blank. The truth is, I haven't been to enough places or restaurants to give anyone an opinion worth sharing. But I want to become one of those people who has had all the pizza in the vicinity and can confidently tell you that the dollar pizza place down the road gives you the best bang for your buck. So after that, I want us locals to find go-to places for all exotic cuisines. Because similar to how I don't have go-to places for classic New York foods, there are so many exotic cuisine places in New York City that I have not been to. And you don't need to take a plane to go to these places. It's not like you have to go to Russia to get Russian food. You have to go to Pakistan to get Pakistani food. You don't have to do any of that. You just need to hop on the subway and it's right there. And yet, I don't do it. You probably don't do it too. But we need to, because New York City has a plethora of international cuisine right at our fingertips, and we are missing out. So the next tip is to visit every museum at least once, because New York has a museum for nearly every interest, no matter if your taste is world class or just quirky. I don't want to die without stepping foot into the Museum of Food and Drink Lab, because that's a museum devoted to food, or the Waterfront Barge Museum, or historic Richmond Town, even though that's all the way in Staten Island. But we have so many museums to choose from on so many topics, and we haven't been there yet. Let's go. So the next tip I have for us locals is to get chummy with our neighbors. For a lot of people, myself included, New York is a pretty lonely city, and these unprecedented times have exacerbated that greatly. And since social clubs aren't really that much of a thing right now, and things like Bumble BFF seem a little suspect to me, the least we can do is to get to know the people around us, our neighbors. Not only will we benefit from the increased human interaction, but studies have actually shown that neighborhoods that have neighbors that know each other tend to be safer. So since the average New York City neighborhood has about 60,000 people in it, it would not hurt for you to know a few faces. So the next tip is to take neighborhood tours. It's funny how you can be in an area every day and not really know much about it. And that's why I love neighborhood tours. They allow you to get to know places on a different level. And then afterwards, when you pass by those places again, it's not just buildings to you. They become settings for interesting stories. So the next tip might hit you in your wallet. It's to consciously buy from local small businesses. I mean, these times we gotta stick by our fellow New Yorkers and help them out. And if that means getting the mom and pop version of something that's a little bit more expensive than what you would get at Target or Amazon, then so be it, because you're helping another New Yorker out. And I know it hurts, because I love a deal, you love a deal, but isn't it kind of cool to walk around with something that's made in New York or made by another New Yorker? It's a little bit of street cred right there. So the next tip is for us to know who our local representatives are and what they can do. Yes, what the people in Washington do matters, but I argue that it's the people in City Hall that have a greater impact on our lives, at least day to day. And I think at the very least, we should know their names and what they can do for us. And especially know their names so you know who you should be hollering at when things go awry in your neighborhood. So if the snow hasn't been plowed for you, or the tree hasn't been picked up after a snowstorm, or garbage is still in your street weeks later after collection time, you gotta know who to call because you don't have to live with these things. We have representatives for a reason. Know their names. There are easy websites to find out who represents you, and I'll link to a few of them below. So my last tip for you is to read one book about New York City per month. So part of my love for New York comes from growing up here and walking the streets, but to really tell you the truth, I became head over heels in love with New York once I started reading books about it. Because not only was I learning new things about it that I wouldn't have learned while going about my daily life, but the books also put into words feelings that I have for this city that I couldn't articulate otherwise. So as I continue my love affair with New York, I'm gonna keep reading books about it because that helps keep the spark alive and it increases my knowledge of the city. And I find cool things to do and it makes the place more interesting. And I think it could have the same effect for you if you pick up a book about New York. So what do you think about this ultimate bucket list for New York City locals? Do you think that these tips could help you make the most of your life in the city? What would you add to it? Let me know. Comment section. Also, for more tips about New York's history, things to do, culture, all of those things, I'm right here. I'm a resource for you. Follow me on social media. Follow my blog, especially for full lists of everything. See ya.